The entire court had gathered to watch Alara carry the last forbidden dragon egg to the altar fire. She was not dressed as a guest, nor as a maiden, nor as anything the kingdom would remember after the wedding songs faded. She wore the ash-gray gown of an oath-bound servant, the thin iron collar of royal ownership at her throat, and the white ceremonial gloves given only to those expected to touch cursed things and die quietly afterward. Before her, the great hall of Veyrath blazed with candlelight and banners of black silk. Above the throne, carved dragons twisted through the stone pillars with jaws open, as if the palace itself had been built from the bones of ancient beasts. At the far end of the aisle stood King Kael Draven, the Dragon King of the Northern Crowns, tall and silent beneath a crown of dark gold. Beside him waited Lady Seraphine, his chosen bride, beautiful as winter poison in a gown stitched with pearls and silver scales. Every noble in the hall watched Alara walk toward them with the forbidden egg cradled against her chest, waiting for the moment the altar fire would swallow it. They believed the egg was dead. They believed the bloodline that could wake it had been erased. They believed Alara was only a servant girl bound by oath, useful because she had nothing left to lose. Then the egg pulsed once beneath her hands. A thin crack of blue-gold light split across its black shell, and every dragon statue in the royal hall lowered its stone head. Alara stopped so suddenly the chain attached to her collar rang against the silver basin in her hands. The sound moved through the court like a small scream. No one spoke. Even the musicians froze with bows suspended over strings. The egg had been cold when they placed it in her arms. Cold as riverstone. Cold as something abandoned by life long ago. But now, warmth poured through her gloves and into her palms, deep and living, like a heartbeat answering one she had forgotten she possessed. She looked down, terrified, and saw the crack widen. Light spilled over her fingers. The royal priestess whispered a prayer, then stumbled back from the altar. Lady Seraphine's smile vanished. The Dragon King did not move, but his eyes changed. They were a dark amber, almost gold in the candlelight, and for the first time since Alara had entered the hall, they were fixed entirely on her. "Do not move," he said. His voice was quiet, but every wolf-blooded lord, every dragon-sworn knight, every servant pressed against the walls obeyed, as if the command had been carved into their bones. Alara wanted to obey too. She had been trained to obey since childhood. Oath-bound servants did not lift their eyes, did not answer unless spoken to, did not bleed where nobles could see, and above all, did not interfere with royal rituals. But the egg shuddered violently in her arms. A second crack opened. The silver basin beneath it began to melt. The court erupted. Cursed magic. Take it from her. Burn them both. Alara tried to set the egg down, but the moment she loosened her grip, pain sliced through her chest. Not the pain of fire or blade, but of separation, as though invisible claws had hooked beneath her ribs and pulled. She gasped, clutching the egg closer without meaning to. The shell answered with another flare of light. The iron collar at her throat burned white-hot. Lady Seraphine stepped forward, her veil trembling behind her like wings. "Your Majesty," she said, soft enough to sound wounded, loud enough for the court to hear. "That servant has corrupted the rite." Alara lifted her head. She had heard that tone before. Not from Seraphine, not directly, but from every noble who had ever learned how to turn cruelty into concern. Seraphine did not sound afraid of the egg. She sounded afraid of what it might reveal. King Kael descended one step from the dais. The movement was small. The reaction was not. Knights lowered spears. Wolf alphas straightened. The priestess made a strangled sound. Even Lady Seraphine turned sharply, as if his approach were a greater violation than the egg awakening. Alara's breath caught. She had seen the Dragon King only from far below balconies, across crowded courtyards or in glimpses through half-open doors. He was younger than the legends made him seem, perhaps 30, perhaps a little older. But there was something ancient in the way he carried silence. His black hair fell to his shoulders, bound at the nape with a strip of dark leather. His ceremonial armor was not polished silver like the Southern kings wore, but matte black, scaled and severe, clasped at the throat with a dragon's claw. He looked like a blade that had learned to sit on a throne. He stopped several paces from her. Not close enough to touch. Never close enough to touch. Ilara knew that rumor too. The Dragon King did not allow hands upon him. Not healers, not servants, not lovers. Some said his blood burned with dragon fire. Some said he had killed his first betrothed with a kiss. Some said there was no man beneath the crown at all, only a beast wearing royal skin. His gaze lowered to the egg, then to her collar, then to her face. "What is your name?" he asked. The question struck harder than any insult. No one at court asked oath-bound servants for names. Names belonged to people with families, graves, and choices. Ilara swallowed. "Ilara, your majesty." A faint tremor passed through the egg. Kael heard it. She knew he did, because his jaw tightened. "Who gave you the egg?" Ilara's fingers tightened around the basin. "The high priestess commanded me to carry it." The priestess blanched. Lady Seraphine's expression sharpened. "And who ordered it burned at my wedding?" Kael asked. This time no one answered. The silence was answer enough. Before Ilara could understand the danger forming around her, the egg split open. Light burst upward in a column so bright the entire hall vanished. The force threw nobles backward, extinguished half the candles, and shattered the stained glass moon above the altar. Ilara fell to her knees, but the egg did not fall. The shell unfolded in her arms like black petals, and from within it rose a creature no larger than a newborn wolf pup, scaled in midnight blue, its wings wet with gold fire, its eyes impossibly old. A baby dragon. The court screamed. Ilara could not. The creature blinked at her, smoke curling from its nostrils. Then, with a sound like a broken bell, it climbed from the remains of its shell, wrapped its glowing tail around her wrist, pressed its small horned head against her heart, and bowed, not to the Dragon King, not to the bride, to her. And from the stone mouths of every carved dragon in the hall came a voice older than the kingdom itself. "Blood remembers." Lady Seraphine's face went white. King Kael looked at Ilara, as if the world had ended in front of him, and chosen her as its beginning. Then the baby dragon opened its wings and screamed, not in fear, in recognition. The sound tore through Ilara's body. For one impossible moment, she saw something that was not the hall. A cliff beneath a red moon, a woman running with blood on her hands, dragon eggs hidden beneath funeral cloth, a man in a crown ordering an entire bloodline erased. Then, the vision shattered, and Ilara was back on the cold marble floor with the baby dragon clinging to her chest. "Seize her," Lady Seraphine whispered. No one moved. Her voice sharpened. "Seize her." The royal guards advanced. The baby dragon's eyes flashed. Every torch in the hall turned blue. Ilara stumbled backward, heart hammering. She had never held a weapon. She had never disobeyed a royal command. Her whole life had been built around surviving by becoming small, quiet hands, lowered eyes, measured steps, never ask why, never speak pain aloud, never let a noble see anger, because anger in a servant was treated as rebellion. Yet now, every gaze in the kingdom's most powerful hall was fixed on her, and the impossible creature in her arms was growling at trained soldiers as though it expected her to command them. "I did not do this," she said, but her voice came out thin. Lady Seraphine turned to the court with tears already shining in her eyes. Perfect tears. Royal tears. She brought forbidden blood magic into a sacred wedding. She has awakened a dead beast to challenge the crown. The baby dragon hissed. Ilara flinched as the guards closed in. Then King Kael raised one hand. The guard stopped instantly. Lady Seraphine stared at him. Kael. A dangerous silence followed the use of his name. He did not look at his bride. He looked only at Ilara. "No one touches her." The words should have saved her. Instead, they condemned her more deeply. Whispers ignited across the hall. The nobles saw what Ilara saw. A king who would not touch anyone had just forbidden the court from touching an oath-bound servant. A king standing at his own wedding had spoken first not to his bride, not to his council, not to his priestess, but to the girl on the floor with a forbidden dragon curled against her heart. Lady Seraphine's tears disappeared. You would protect her? Kael's expression hardened. I would understand what has happened before I burn the only witness. She is not a witness, Seraphine said. She is the cause. Alara wanted to deny it, but the baby dragon lifted its head and stared at Seraphine with hatred too focused for a newborn creature. The reaction rippled through the court. Kael noticed. So did Seraphine. A small smile returned to the noblewoman's lips, colder than before. Then let the ancient law decide. If the creature is truly of royal dragon blood, it will obey the Dragon King. Command it, Your Majesty. Command it away from her. A murmur spread. Ilara's arms tightened around the dragon. She did not know why fear struck her so sharply. If Kael commanded the dragon and it obeyed, perhaps she would be freed from suspicion. Perhaps the court would remember she was only a servant. Perhaps this nightmare would end. But when Kael took one step closer, the baby dragon pressed itself against Alara and bared its tiny teeth. The Dragon King stopped. His eyes darkened with something Alara could not read. Slowly, he lifted his hand not toward Alara, but toward the creature. His glove was black leather, embroidered with old runes. The air around him seemed to heat. A faint golden glow moved beneath his skin at the wrist, like fire trapped under flesh. Come, he commanded. The word carried power. It rolled through the hall like thunder through mountains. Every wolf in the room lowered its head. Every flame bent toward him. Alara felt the command in her bones. The baby dragon did not move. Kael's face went still. Seraphine's smile widened. Kael's voice dropped. Come to your king. The baby dragon turned its head, looked directly at him, and gave a small, defiant snort of smoke. A stunned sound passed through the nobles. Then the creature curled tighter around Ilara's wrist. The court broke into chaos. Seraphine stepped back as if betrayed by the air itself. The high priestess began chanting. The royal council shouted over one another. A gray-haired alpha lord called for Ilara's execution. Another demanded the wedding be halted. Somewhere in the gallery, a woman fainted. The iron collar around Ilara's throat pulsed with heat, and suddenly she could not breathe. Kael saw her hand rise to the collar. What is that oath? He asked sharply. Alara tried to answer, but the collar tightened. Seraphine spoke first. A standard binding vow. The girl belongs to the palace service. Kael's gaze did not leave Alara. That is not a palace servant's collar. The hall quieted by degrees. Alara's vision blurred. The collar had been around her throat since she was 12 years old, since the day she was brought through the eastern gate with no memory of her parents, and a blood-stained scrap of blue cloth hidden in her fist. She had been told the collar protected her. Then she had been told it controlled her. Then she had stopped asking. Kael looked toward the priestess. Remove it. The priestess went rigid. Your Majesty, that would be unwise. Remove it. Seraphine's voice sharpened. This is not the time for sentiment. For the first time, Kael turned to her fully. The room seemed to lose warmth. Do not mistake restraint for sentiment. The bride fell silent. But Alara understood something then. Kael might be king, but even kings could stand inside cages. His was made of court law, ancient fear, and the woman he had nearly married. Hers was made of iron. The high priestess approached with a silver key, though every step seemed to pain her. The baby dragon growled low. Ilara whispered without thinking. No, don't hurt her. The dragon quieted. Kael's gaze flicked to her face. The priestess inserted the key. The collar opened. The moment iron left Ilara's skin, the floor beneath her knees lit with a circle of ancient runes. Every symbol burned blue gold. The baby dragon lifted its head, and from somewhere deep beneath the palace, something enormous answered with a roar. Not the cry of a baby, not the voice of stone. A living dragon, buried, awake, hungry. The entire palace shook. Dust rained from the rafters. Nobles screamed and scattered. The altar fire exploded upward, twisting into the shape of wings. Ilara clutched the baby dragon and staggered to her feet, but the runes followed her, circling beneath her bare steps like the floor itself knew her. Kael stared at the glowing marks. His voice was almost a whisper. Dragon Whisperer. The words struck the hall harder than the roar. The high priestess dropped the key. Seraphine's face transformed not with fear now, but with pure, naked recognition. Ilara shook her head. No, I'm no one. Kale looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw not a king, not a beast, not the merciless ruler from whispered stories. She saw a man standing at the edge of a truth he had feared all his life. You are not no one, he said. Before he could say more, the palace doors burst open. A commander in blood-spattered armor stumbled into the hall and fell to one knee. Your Majesty, he gasped. The dragon vault has cracked. Something beneath the palace is breaking free. The baby dragon, in Ilara's arms, turned toward the sound. Then it spoke inside her mind. Not in words exactly, but in meaning so clear, it stole her breath. Mother. Ilara went cold. Across the hall, Kale heard nothing, but he saw her reaction. He took one step toward her. What did it say? Ilara could barely breathe. The baby dragon pressed its head to her heart again. Mother. The roar beneath the palace came again, closer this time. And Lady Seraphine, still dressed as a bride, slowly reached into her sleeve and closed her fingers around a hidden blade of white bone. The second roar split through the foundations of the palace, hard enough to crack marble beneath the noble's feet. Chandeliers swayed violently overhead, spraying crystal across the royal hall like falling ice. Panic rippled through the court. Lords abandoned dignity and shoved one another toward the exits. Wolf guards barked commands. No one obeyed. Somewhere near the eastern gallery, a child began screaming for his mother. Yet through the chaos, Ilara remained frozen inside the glowing circle of runes. The baby dragon wrapped around her wrist like a living chain. Mother. The words still echoed through her mind. Not queen. Not mistress. Not master. Mother. It should have been impossible. She had never held a dragon before tonight. Never touched one. Never even seen one outside old carvings and forbidden murals, hidden beneath dust-covered temple cloths. Dragons had vanished long before her birth. The kingdom only spoke of them in mourning rites and war songs now. So why had the creature looked at her with recognition? And worse, why had a part of her recognized it too? Ilara. The Dragon King's voice cut through the panic. She looked up sharply. Kyle had descended fully from the throne dais now. The court parted around him instinctively, not from obedience, but fear. There was something different about him suddenly. The control he wore like armor had cracked. Golden veins pulsed faintly beneath the skin of his throat, glowing under the collar of his black ceremonial coat. Heat shimmered around him, invisible waves. The dragon soul inside him. She did not know how she understood that. She simply did. Seraphine noticed too. Your Majesty, the high priestess whispered nervously, you must leave the hall before the curse worsens. Kale ignored her. His eyes remained locked on Ilara. What did the hatchling say to you? The baby dragon tightened around Ilara's arm possessively. The court watched her. Every noble face carried a different shade of fear now. Not because she was dangerous yet, but because she might become dangerous. In kingdoms built on bloodlines, possibility alone was enough to earn execution. Ilara swallowed carefully. I do not know. It was not entirely a lie. The dragon had not truly spoken. It had placed meaning directly into her chest, bypassing sound entirely. Kale stepped closer. The baby dragon snarled. The king stopped instantly. The reaction stunned the room. Dragons obeyed kings. That was the oldest law of Veyrath. The royal bloodline itself existed because ancient dragon kings had once chained the great beasts to their will. Yet this tiny hatchling had now denied Kale twice, and protected her twice. Seraphine's gaze sharpened with calculation. Then she smiled. It was a beautiful smile. Deadly people often possessed beautiful smiles. Perhaps the creature is confused, she said gently to the court. After all, beasts imprint on the first warmth they find. The tension eased slightly among the nobles. Several nodded eagerly. Yes, of course. A mistake. An accident. Better that explanation than the alternative. But Seraphine was not finished. Still, she continued softly. Ancient law is clear. Any servant touched by forbidden dragon magic must undergo blood judgment before the throne. The hall quieted again. Alara's stomach dropped. Blood judgment. Every servant in Veyrath knew the words. Some called it trial. Most called it execution with ceremony. The high priestess immediately lowered her eyes. The law requires purification before moonrise. Kael's expression darkened. The law was written 800 years ago during the Burning Wars, and remains law, Seraphine replied smoothly. The nobles began murmuring again. Louder this time. She must be tested. What if she carries corrupted blood? The hatchling could spread dragon plague. The Whisperers nearly destroyed the realm once before. Alara's chest tightened. Whisperers. Again that word. Fragments flickered through her mind, suddenly small hands covered in soot. A woman singing beside firelight. Scales glittering beneath moonlight. A voice whispering, "Run, if they find you." Pain stabbed behind her eyes. The baby dragon whined, softly against her wrist. Kael noticed. Everything about him seemed sharpened tonight, as if the hatchling's appearance had awakened something dangerous inside him too. "She is frightened," he said quietly. The words should not have mattered. Yet Alara felt the entire court react. Kings did not speak of servant girls with gentleness. Seraphine heard it too. A tiny fracture appeared in her composure. "My king," she said carefully, "you dishonor our wedding by defending her so openly." At that, Kael finally looked toward the bride, waiting beside the altar. For a heartbeat, silence swallowed the hall. Alara expected apology, duty, cold royal distance. Instead, Kael said, "The wedding is suspended." The words detonated through the court. Seraphine went perfectly still, not shocked, not wounded, still, like a knife deciding where to strike. "You would suspend a royal union?" she asked softly. "For a servant carrying cursed blood?" Kael's jaw tightened. "I would suspend it because something beneath my palace just awakened for the first time in 2 centuries. Another distant roar thundered through the stone. Closer now. The floor trembled again. Somewhere deep below the palace, chains screamed. Real chains. Huge ones. Fear swept visibly through the nobles. Alara stared at Kael. He knew what was buried beneath the palace. More than that, he feared it. The realization unsettled her deeply. Kael Draven did not seem like a man who feared anything. The baby dragon lifted its head suddenly and hissed toward the western corridor. A second later, black smoke began curling beneath the doors. Guards shouted. The doors burst open. Heat flooded the hall. A knight staggered inside. Half his armor melted to his skin. "The lower vaults are burning." Behind him came another sound. A growl. Not wolf. Not human. Dragon. The nobles erupted into chaos again. "Seal the palace. Get the queen to be to safety. Kill the hatchling." At the last shout, the baby dragon spread its tiny wings and screeched. Blue fire exploded outward. The nearest guard flew backward into a pillar. The entire court recoiled in horror. Alara stared down at the hatchling in shock. "Stop!" The dragon immediately quieted. Another silence fell. Kael saw it. So did everyone else. The creature obeyed her. Not him. Not the royal bloodline. Here. The implications were monstrous. Seraphine recovered first. "You see?" she said sharply. "The beast answers only to her. She controls it already." "I'm not controlling anything," Alara whispered, but no one listened. The fear in the room had evolved now. Before, they feared forbidden magic. Now, they feared losing power. Kael moved between Alara and the advancing guards. The gesture was small, devastating. The Dragon King had just physically placed himself between the throne and a servant girl. Every noble in the hall understood what that meant politically, even if Kael himself did not yet realize it. Or perhaps he did. His eyes remained fixed ahead as he spoke quietly. "No one draws steel, but your majesty." That was not a request. The temperature in the hall surged violently. Golden light flashed beneath Kael's skin. The nearest guards immediately stepped back. Ilara stared. For the first time, she truly saw the strain beneath his control. His breathing was uneven. His hands were clenched hard enough to tremble. Heat rolled from him in dangerous waves, distorting the air itself. The dragon soul inside him was unstable, and somehow, the hatchling's presence was making it worse. Or stronger. She could not tell which frightened her more. Seraphine watched Kael carefully now, and Ilara finally recognized the truth hidden beneath the noblewoman's perfect grace. Seraphine was afraid of the king, not politically, personally, as though she knew exactly what he became when control failed. "My king," Seraphine said softly, "your condition worsens." Kael's eyes flashed toward her. The court pretended not to notice. No one spoke openly about the Dragon King's curse, yet everyone knew whispers. Servants disappearing after touching him. Rooms blackened by fire during his sleep. Physicians burned alive inside locked chambers. A king no bride could survive. Kael's voice dropped lower. Enough. But Seraphine stepped closer anyway. Bold. Careful. Manipulative. "You promised the council stability," she said gently. "If the court sees this servant as your weakness, she is not my weakness." The answer came instantly. Too instantly. Silence crashed down again. Even Kael seemed to realize the mistake a heartbeat too late. Ilara's pulse stumbled. Seraphine saw everything. Jealousy flickered across her face. Not romantic jealousy, but strategic terror. Kael was slipping beyond her influence. And all because of a nameless servant carrying a forbidden hatchling, which meant Ilara would not survive the night if Seraphine could prevent it. The realization settled coldly into Ilara's bones. The baby dragon pressed closer to her throat protectively. Then suddenly, pain exploded through her wrist. Ilara gasped. The hatchling's claws dug into her skin not to hurt, but to warn. Someone was behind her. She turned, just as silver chains flew through the air. The high priestess had moved faster than anyone expected. The enchanted chains wrapped around Ilara's arms and waist, slamming her to the marble floor. The baby dragon shrieked in fury as holy symbols ignited along the metal. "Forgive me, your majesty," the priestess cried. "But the realm cannot survive another dragon whisperer." The hall erupted. Kael moved instantly. Too late. The chains tightened. Agony ripped through Ilara's body. Not because of iron, because the chains carried moon-binding magic. Ancient execution magic. The same kind once used to slaughter forbidden bloodlines. Visions slammed into her mind violently. Fire, consuming towers. Dragons screaming beneath red skies. Children dragged from hidden tunnels. A woman kneeling before soldiers with dragon eggs hidden beneath her cloak. "Run, little flame, run," Ilara screamed. Blue-gold fire burst from beneath her skin. The silver chains cracked. The entire hall froze. Symbols blazed across Ilara's arms. Ancient glowing marks, spiraling like dragon scales beneath her flesh. The baby dragon roared, and every torch in the palace went dark. Only Ilara remained illuminated. Kael stared at her with naked shock now. Not fear. Recognition. The runes on her skin were not random. They were royal, older than his dynasty itself. The lost marks of the Dragon Whisperer queens. The women his ancestors had erased from history. Seraphine whispered, horrified. "Impossible." The glowing symbols climbed higher across Ilara's throat, then stopped directly beneath her jaw. A Christ, a crown-shaped mark. The ancient royal seal of House Valor. The first dragon rulers, dead for centuries. Or so the kingdom believed. The court dropped to its knees almost instinctively. Not from loyalty, from terror. The baby dragon unfurled its wings and stood proudly on Ilara's shoulder. Then, in a voice no newborn creature should possess, it spoke aloud to the entire hall. "The queen has returned." And beneath the palace, something enormous answered with a roar powerful enough to split the mountain beneath the kingdom itself. The mountain beneath Veyroth answered the roar with trembling stone. Cracks raced across the marble floor of the royal hall like black lightning. Noblewomen screamed as sections of the ceiling collapsed, raining dust and shattered crystal over the court. Guards rushed toward the exits, while priests fell to their knees chanting ancient protection rites. Yet through all of it, no one looked away from Alara, or from the royal crest burning beneath her skin. The queen has returned. The hatchling's voice still echoed against the pillars. Alara could barely breathe beneath the weight of hundreds of horrified stares. She wanted to deny everything. She wanted to tear the glowing mark from her throat and throw it into the fire. She wanted someone to tell her this was a trick, a fever dream, anything except truth. Instead, the baby dragon pressed against her cheek with frightening affection, and every dragon carved into the palace walls lowered its head farther. The high priestess backed away first. "No," she whispered. "No, you are all destroyed." KL moved toward Alara slowly, carefully, like a man approaching a wildfire he could neither control nor survive. The glow beneath his skin had intensified now, spreading across his throat and wrists in molten patterns. His dragon curse reacted violently to her presence. The court noticed. Fear deepened. Not only had the forbidden bloodline returned, it was affecting the king himself. Seraphine's face hardened with sudden calculation. Alara saw it happen in real time. Panic becoming strategy. Fear becoming opportunity. "Your Majesty," Seraphine said sharply, loud enough for the council to hear. "The prophecy." Silence crashed through the hall. Kale's gaze snapped toward her. Too late. The nobles had heard. The prophecy. Whispers ignited, instantly. The Dragon Queen prophecy? The one about the fallen throne? She carries the ancient crest. The kingdom will burn. Alara looked between them in confusion. What prophecy? No one answered her. Kale's expression had gone dangerously unreadable. Seraphine stepped forward, silver skirts sweeping through dust and shattered glass like flowing ice. "Tell her," she said softly. "Tell the court why your father ordered the dragon whisperers erased." Kyle said nothing. That silence frightened Alara more than shouting would have. The hatchling hissed low against her shoulder. Seraphine's voice rose, elegant and merciless. The prophecy foretold that when the Dragon Queen returned, she would either restore the dragons or drown the kingdom in ash. The hall erupted again. Some nobles recoiled from Alara as though she carried plague. Others stared with desperate fascination. Ancient bloodlines meant power. Power meant war. The old Alpha Lord from earlier slammed his staff against the floor. She must die now before the prophecy awakens fully. Several council members immediately agreed. Eliminate the threat. The dragons nearly destroyed the northern kingdoms once already. If the people discover the Whisperer bloodline survived, Kyle's voice cut through them like steel. No one will touch her. The force behind the command shook the room. Golden fire flashed beneath his skin violently this time. A nearby banner burst into flames. The court fell silent. Alara stared at him. He was losing control, and he was doing it because of her. The realization struck something dangerous, loose inside her chest. Not hope. Hope was too fragile. But confusion, curiosity. The terrifying possibility that the most feared king in the north was standing between her and death at enormous personal cost. Seraphine saw that too, which meant she struck immediately. "You would risk the realm," she asked quietly, "for a servant girl whose bloodline slaughtered your ancestors." Kale turned toward her at last. The air grew hotter. She is not responsible for crimes committed centuries before her birth. "And when the dragons rise again?" Seraphine demanded. "When your people burn alive because you hesitated?" "She has done nothing except survive." The words landed harder than shouting, because they were true. Alara suddenly realized something horrifying. Kyle understood her. Not her bloodline, not the prophecy. Here, the exhaustion, the survival, the life spent enduring punishment for existing incorrectly inside powerful rooms. That understanding frightened her more than hatred would have. Because hatred she knew how to survive. Kindness was far more dangerous. Another roar thundered beneath the palace. Closer. The entire western wall cracked open. Heat exploded into the hall. Then came the sound of snapping chains. Not metaphorical ones. Real chains. Massive. Ancien. Every face in the court drained of color. The vault. the high priestess whispered in horror. Kale's expression darkened instantly. Evacuate the hall. The command broke the paralysis, gripping the nobles. Panic erupted as council members fled toward the exits, dragging servants and guards behind them. The musicians abandoned instruments. Priests scattered sacred texts across the floor in terror. Yet Seraphine did not move. Neither did Kale, nor Elara. The baby dragon suddenly lifted its head toward the shattered western wall. Smoke curled inward. Something huge was moving below. Something alive. Elara felt it before she heard it. A pulse beneath the mountain. Slow. Enormous. Ancient. The hatchling whimpered softly. Not in fear. In longing. Then a voice echoed faintly through Elara's mind. Wake me. She staggered. Kale caught the movement instantly. What is it? Elara pressed a trembling hand against her temple. Something is speaking to me. The high priestess made a horrified sound. Seraphine's eyes gleamed. Of course it is. Kale ignored her completely. What does it say? Elara hesitated, because the truth sounded insane even inside her own mind. It says... Her throat tightened. It says, wake me. Silence. Then Kale swore softly beneath his breath. A very human sound from a man who rarely seemed human at all. Seraphine noticed his reaction immediately. You know what's beneath the palace. Kale did not answer. Which was answer. Enough. Elara stared at him. There's a dragon down there. His eyes met hers. For one terrible moment, she saw genuine fear inside them. Yes. The word barely left his mouth before the western wall exploded inward. Stone shattered across the hall. Guards screamed. A massive claw burst through the broken wall, black-scaled and enormous enough to crush 10 men at once. Heat rolled through the chamber in suffocating waves. Smoke swallowed the ceiling. The court descended into madness. Elara stumbled backward as the creature forced itself partially through the ruined stone. One blazing golden eye appeared through the smoke. Ancien, furious, starving. The chain dragon. It was enormous beyond comprehension, larger than castle towers. Its scales scarred with centuries of wounds and molten iron restraints embedded directly into flesh. Broken chains hung from its throat and wings like torn bones, and its gaze fixed instantly on Elara. Not Kyle, not Seraphine. Here. The hatchling cried out. The great dragon answered with a sound so deep the marble floor split beneath everyone's feet. Then every guard in the hall raised weapons at once. No, Elara shouted instinctively. The dragon froze. The entire court saw it obey. A horrifying silence followed. Kale stared at her openly now, all restraint fractured. What are you? Elara shook her head desperately. I don't know. But memory was beginning to bleed through the cracks inside her mind. A woman with silver eyes singing beside dragonfire. Hidden caverns beneath snow-covered mountains. Eggs wrapped in royal cloth. Soldiers slaughtering children. And a voice whispering over and over, protect the last heart. The giant dragon lowered its head toward Elara slowly. Not aggressively. Reverently. The movement shook the palace. Several nobles immediately dropped to their knees. Others ran screaming from the hall. The high priestess looked ready to faint. It recognizes her. Seraphine recovered faster than anyone else, which was why she struck before fear could fully consume the room. She has bewitched the beast, she shouted. Kill the dragon before she awakens the rest. Archers moved instantly. Kyle roared. Stand down. Tulat. An arrow flew. Elara barely saw it, but the hatchling did. The baby dragon launched from her shoulder with a furious shriek, intercepting the arrow midair. The shaft pierced its tiny wing. The creature screamed in pain. Time stopped. Elara caught the hatchling as it fell against her chest, trembling. Something inside her broke. Not gently, not beautifully, violently. Heat exploded through her bloodstream. The glowing marks beneath her skin flared blindingly bright. Ancient runes raced across her arms, throat, and spine like living fire. Wind tore through the ruined hall. The giant dragon recoiled sharply, not in fear, In recognition, Ilara lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were glowing now. Blue gold, the same color as dragonfire. Every voice in the court fell silent. The injured hatchling whimpered weakly in her hands, and Ilara, quiet, obedient Ilara who had spent her entire life surviving by becoming invisible, felt rage for the first time in years. Not childish anger, not wounded embarrassment. Ancien rage, inherited rage. The rage of a bloodline hunted into extinction. The shattered torches around the hall ignited at once. Blue flames spiraled upward. The giant dragon bowed its massive head before her. Then, one by one, every wolf in the royal guard lowered themselves to the ground instinctively beneath the pressure of her awakening power. Even Kyle staggered back a step, not because he feared her, because his dragon soul recognized hers. Seraphine saw the shift in the room immediately. The balance of power was changing, and if it finished changing, she would lose everything. Her crown, her influence, the throne she had bled years to secure. So she made her choice. With terrifying calm, Seraphine drew the hidden white-bone dagger from her sleeve and drove it straight toward Ilara's heart. Kyle moved before thought. The entire hall erupted in fire. Seraphine's white-bone dagger never reached Ilara's heart because the Dragon King caught the blade with his bare hand. Steel should have split flesh. Instead, golden fire exploded from his palm the instant the dagger touched him. The heat wave shattered nearby pillars and hurled nobles backward across the marble floor. Seraphine stumbled away in shock. Kale did not. He stood between her and Ilara now, his body rigid with violent control, the dagger embedded through his burning hand. Smoke curled from his skin. Gold light pulsed beneath his throat and spread upward along his jaw like cracks inside molten stone. The court stared in horror, not at the blood, at the fact that Kyle had touched the blade himself. The Dragon King never touched anything directly. Not servants, not lovers, not even ceremonial weapons. Everything around him eventually burned. But now, he held the dagger without hesitation, because Seraphine had aimed it at Ilara, and the entire court understood what that meant. Seraphine's face drained of color first with shock, then with fury. "You would protect her from me?" Kyle slowly pulled the dagger free from his hand. The wound closed almost instantly beneath dragonfire. "Ilara is under my protection," he said. The words fell into the ruined hall like an execution sentence. Because protection from the Dragon King was not kindness. It was possession, political claim, war. The council members still lingering near the exits looked ready to collapse. Several immediately began whispering calculations to one another. Alliances shifting. Houses choosing sides. If Kale publicly shielded a surviving dragon whisperer, the northern kingdoms could fracture overnight. Ilara barely heard any of it. Her attention remained fixed on the hatchling trembling weakly in her arms. Blood stained its tiny wing. The sight twisted something unbearable inside her chest. "It's hurt," she whispered. The hatchling whimpered softly against her fingers. Then instinct not thought moved through her. Ilara pressed her palm carefully over the wound. Warmth surged through her veins instantly. The glowing marks across her skin brightened. Blue-gold fire gathered around her hand. The court gasped collectively. Kale turned sharply toward her, just as light poured from her fingertips into the hatchling's broken wing. The baby dragon cried out once. Then the wound vanished. Perfect scales reformed beneath her touch. The hall went dead silent. Healing, not destruction, not corruption. Healing. The giant dragon beyond the shattered wall lowered itself farther, watching Ilara with open reverence now. The high priestess looked physically ill. "No," she whispered. "The old gifts." Ilara stared at her own glowing hand in disbelief. She had never healed anything before, never even herself. All her life wounds had simply been endured, hidden, survived. Yet now, power moved through her as naturally as breath. The hatchling licked her wrist affectionately. Kale's gaze remained fixed on her hand, not fearful, hungry for understanding. And beneath that, something more dangerous. Hope. Seraphine saw it too, which was why hatred finally stripped away the last of her elegance. "You fool," she hissed at Kale. "Do you truly not understand what she is?" Kale's expression hardened. "I understand enough." "No," Seraphine snapped. "You understand nothing." She turned toward the court, voice rising sharply. Her bloodline corrupted dragons themselves. The Whisperer Queens enslaved beasts and kings alike. They nearly destroyed the North before your ancestors buried them beneath ash and stone. The surviving nobles shifted uneasily. Old fear still lived inside the kingdom's bones. Ilara felt it pressing against her from every direction. The terror of history. The terror of forgotten power returning. But before anyone else could speak, the giant chained dragon pushed farther through the broken wall. Stone exploded outward. The palace shook violently. Screams erupted again, as nobles fled completely this time, abandoning dignity for survival. The dragon's enormous body scraped against ancient pillars, black scales glistening beneath firelight. Heavy iron chains still pierced its wings and throat, dragging shattered stone behind it. It was suffering. Ilara felt that truth instantly, not through sight, through bond. The creature's pain crashed into her chest like drowning water. Centuries underground. Centuries chained. Centuries alone. Tears burned unexpectedly behind her eyes. The dragon lowered its massive head until one glowing golden eye filled her entire vision. And inside her mind came a voice, ancient enough to crack mountains. "Little flame." Ilara staggered. Kale caught her elbow before she fell. The moment his gloved hand touched her skin, both of them froze. Heat exploded through the contact. Kale inhaled sharply like a man stabbed through the chest. Golden fire surged violently beneath his skin. Ilara gasped as strange warmth flooded her own body in answer. The hatchling chirped excitedly. The giant dragon rumbled low, and every remaining noble in the hall stared in dawning horror. The bond, not merely dragon magic, Matabund. Kale released her instantly, almost violently, stepping backward as though the touch itself endangered the kingdom. His control fractured visibly. Flames burst across the ruined floor around him. "Your Majesty." A guard began nervously. "Leave," Kale snarled. The guard fled immediately. Ilara stared at him, shaken. For one brief second during that touch, she had felt him. Not the king. The loneliness beneath him. The exhaustion. The endless restraint. The terror of hurting everyone he touched. And beneath all of it, the dragon inside him screaming at the sight of her. Kale turned away sharply, jaw clenched hard enough to tremble. Seraphine watched everything. Every reaction. Every fracture. Then slowly, horrifyingly, she smiled. "Oh," she whispered. "That's why." Kyle went still. Seraphine's laughter echoed softly through the ruined hall. Not hysterical. Worse, triumphant. The prophecy wasn't warning about her, she realized aloud. It was warning about you. Ilara frowned in confusion. Kale's face darkened with unmistakable fury. Enough. But Seraphine ignored him completely now. "The dying dragon soul," she continued, eyes gleaming. "The unstable fire. The madness spreading through the royal bloodline. Your father believed the Dragon Queen would destroy the kingdom because she would awaken you." Silence swallowed the hall. Ilara looked toward Kale slowly. His silence confirmed everything. The prophecy had never terrified him because of dragons. It terrified him because of himself. The giant dragon rumbled again. "Little flame." The ancient voice echoed inside Ilara's mind. "He burns alone." Her chest tightened painfully. Kyle noticed her expression, and something raw flickered briefly across his face. Fear, almost. Not fear of her power. Fear that she might pity him. That fear hurt far more than it should have. Before Ilara could speak, another sound thundered through the palace. War horns. Not from inside the castle. Outside. The entire hall went still. A blood-covered soldier burst through the eastern doors, gasping for breath. "Your Majesty, the northern gates have fallen." Kale spun sharply. "To whom?" The soldier swallowed hard. "The Iron Fang Legion." Shock crashed through the remaining court. Ilara recognized the name instantly. Every servant did. The Iron Fangs were not merely soldiers. They were dragon hunters. Fanatics descended from the old war clans that exterminated magical bloodlines during the Burning Wars. Ruthless, merciless, loyal, only to destruction. Seraphine went pale, this time genuinely. Kale's eyes narrowed dangerously. How did they enter the capital? No one answered immediately. Then Kale looked toward Seraphine. Understanding hit the room like lightning. Seraphine stepped backward once. Careful, she said softly. The Dragon King's voice became terrifyingly calm. You opened the gates. It was necessary. For whom? For the kingdom, she snapped suddenly. You were weakening. The court knew it. Your curse worsens every year, Kyle. The dragons beneath the palace are waking. The northern packs are restless. And now the last whisperer appears during our wedding carrying a royal hatchling. Her eyes burned with desperate fury. I chose survival. Kale stared at her with something colder than rage. Betrayal. Deep and exhausted. How long? He asked quietly. Seraphine lifted her chin. Long enough to know you would never choose the realm over your obsession with forbidden blood. Outside, distant screams echoed through the city. The Iron Fang Legion had entered Veyrath, and suddenly, Alara understood the true danger. This was never just about prophecy. The kingdom was already breaking. The giant dragon shifted violently behind them, chains dragging sparks across stone. The hatchling hissed toward the eastern corridors. Kale turned toward Alara then, fully. No throne between them. No court. No distance. Only truth. They're coming for you, he said. Alara's throat tightened. Not because she doubted it. Because of the look in his eyes. He already knew he would burn the world before handing her over. And that terrified him, almost as much as it terrified her. Another explosion shook the palace. Closer. The Iron Fangs were inside the outer halls now. Kale's golden eyes flashed toward the approaching sounds of battle. Decision hardened across his face instantly. He looked at Alara. Then, at the ancient dragon behind her. Then at the hatchling curled around her shoulders. And finally back to her again. Can you trust me? He asked quietly. The question struck harder than commands ever could. Because no one had asked Alara for trust before. Only obedience. Outside the ruined hall, armored footsteps thundered closer through burning corridors. The hunt had begun. The palace bells began to ring. Not ceremonial bells. War bells. Deep iron thunder rolled through Veyrath in violent waves, echoing across towers and frozen courtyards beneath the storm-dark sky. Outside the shattered western wall, snow whipped through the mountain air in pale spirals, carrying smoke from the lower city. Somewhere beyond the palace gates, steel crashed against steel. Wolves howled. Men screamed. The Iron Fang Legion had entered the capital, and they had come for her. Alara stood motionless at the center of the ruined hall, while the bells roared overhead. Kyle's question still hung between them. Can you trust me? Trust. The word felt foreign inside her chest. Trust had never protected her before. Trust had been the reason servants disappeared quietly into cold prison towers. Trust had been why children surrendered knives before beatings. Trust had been how weak people survived long enough to become useful. Yet Kyle was standing before her now with dragonfire burning beneath his skin and betrayal fresh in his eyes, asking for something no king should ever ask from an oath-bound servant. Choice. The hatchling pressed against her throat anxiously. The giant chained dragon behind her growled low as distant explosions shook the palace again. Kyle stepped closer. Alara. She looked up. The gold in his eyes had deepened dangerously now, almost molten. His control was slipping further every minute. She could feel the dragon's soul raging beneath his skin, reacting violently to battle, betrayal, and her. You don't have much time, he said quietly. Neither do you, she almost answered, because she could see it now. Whatever lived inside Kale was consuming him alive. Before she could speak, the eastern doors burst inward. 3 royal guards stumbled into the hall covered in blood. The Iron Fangs breached the second gate. One gasped. They're slaughtering anyone carrying dragon marks. Kale's face turned lethal instantly. How many entered? At least 500. Too many. Even Alara understood that immediately. The Iron Fang Legion never marched without purpose. They were executioners, not conquerors. If they had brought 500 men into the capital, they intended extermination. The giant dragon behind the ruined wall shifted violently. Little flame. The ancient voice echoed inside her mind. They smell our blood again. Our blood. Ilara's chest tightened painfully. Kael heard none of it, but he saw her expression. He saw everything too easily around her. His gaze flicked toward the massive dragon. Can it move? The creature's enormous golden eye fixed on him. Then slowly, the dragon bared its teeth. Kael exhaled once through his nose. I'll take that as a no. Despite everything, despite fear and fire and blood, the dry edge in his voice startled something dangerously close to laughter inside Alara. The feeling vanished almost immediately beneath exhaustion. The hatchling suddenly lifted its head sharply, then hissed. Kael turned instantly toward the corridor. Too late. Arrows exploded through the doorway. Kael moved with terrifying speed. Dragonfire erupted from his body in a sweeping wave of gold flame that incinerated the arrows mid-air before they reached Alara. The heat slammed through the hall hard enough to crack nearby pillars. Then the Iron Fang soldiers charged inside. They wore black iron armor etched with moon-killing runes, their cloaks stained dark with old blood. Wolf pelts hung from their shoulders. Dragon teeth lined their belts like trophies. Hunters. Executioners. The lead commander removed his helmet slowly. An older man. Scarred. Gray-eyed. Calm. And smiling. Well, he said, voice rough with amusement. The rumors were true. His gaze fixed immediately on Alara's glowing marks. Not surprise. Recognition. The sight chilled her more deeply than hatred would have. You know me? She whispered. No, the commander replied. But I knew your mother. Kael's expression darkened instantly. Commander Varos. So the Dragon King knew him too. Varos inclined his head mockingly. Your Majesty, you entered my capital uninvited, and found it conveniently opened. At that, his gaze flicked briefly toward Seraphine. The noblewoman stiffened. Understanding crashed through Alara. Seraphine had not merely opened the gates. She had invited monsters inside her kingdom. Varos studied Alara openly now. You look like her. Ilara's pulse stumbled. My mother? The last Dragon Queen. His smile faded slightly. She screamed longer than the others. Kael moved before thought. The flames came first. Dragonfire exploded across the hall in a golden inferno, aimed directly at Varos. The commander barely escaped in time, throwing himself sideways as molten heat consumed half the doorway behind him. Iron Fang soldiers screamed as several burned alive instantly. Alara stared at Kael in shock. Not because he attacked, because of the fury. Pure, uncontrolled fury. The palace trembled beneath it. Varos rolled to his feet, coughing smoke, but he was still smiling. There he is, he rasped. The beast beneath the crown. Kael's voice became inhumanly low. Say another word about her mother. Golden scales began surfacing beneath the skin of his throat. Ilara's breath caught. Transformation. Partial. Unstable. The giant dragon behind her rumbled anxiously. The hatchling whimpered. Kael was losing control. Varos saw it too, which meant he attacked immediately. Kill the girl. Iron Fang soldiers surged forward. The hall descended into violence. Kael met them head-on like a storm-given flesh. Dragonfire ripped through armored bodies. Claws not fully human anymore tore through iron and bone. Every movement carried brutal precision, born from years of restrained savagery. And still, he never let a single soldier reach Alara. Not one. The realization shook her more deeply than battle itself. He was protecting her, not strategically, instinctively. The giant dragon suddenly lunged forward from the shattered wall with a roar that split the hall apart. Its chains snapped through pillars as its massive jaws closed around a line of advancing Iron Fang soldiers. Blood sprayed across marble. The court's remaining guards fled in terror. Alara stumbled backward, clutching the hatchling, while chaos swallowed everything around her. Fire consumed royal banners. Smoke rolled across the ceiling. Wolves screamed somewhere deep within the palace. Then someone grabbed her arm. Séraphine. The noblewoman dragged Alara violently behind a fallen pillar before anyone noticed. "You idiot child," Séraphine hissed. Alara tried to pull free, but Séraphine pressed a hidden blade against her ribs instantly. "Stay still." For the first time since the wedding began, Séraphine looked truly terrified. Not elegant, not composed. Terrified. "Alara," she whispered sharply, "listen to me carefully. If Varos captures you alive, the northern kingdoms will drown in blood. You helped him invade the capital. I helped him kill the dragon beneath the palace," Séraphine snapped. "Not you." Another explosion shook the hall. Kale roared somewhere through the smoke. Seraphine's grip tightened painfully. "You don't understand what your bloodline does to kings." Alara stared at her. "What does that mean?" Séraphine hesitated, just long enough for truth to become visible behind her eyes. "Jealousy. Not romantic jealousy. Fear of replacement. You think Kale protects you because he's noble?" Séraphine whispered bitterly. "Your blood is binding itself to the dragon inside him. Whisperer queens don't merely command dragons. They awaken them." Alara went cold. "No. Yes." Seraphine's expression twisted. "And once the bond completes, he will burn the world before he lets anyone take you." The hatchling hissed furiously at Séraphine. The noblewoman ignored it. "You want to know why the Whisperers were slaughtered?" she demanded softly. "Because kings stopped ruling themselves around them." Ilara's chest tightened painfully. Across the ruined hall, Kael tore through another line of Iron Fang soldiers with terrifying violence. Every time she cried out, he answered instantly. Every time danger neared her, his dragon fire exploded harder. Séraphine saw her watching him. "That isn't love yet," she whispered. "It's worse. It's dragon instinct, possession, obsession." The words should have disgusted Alara. Instead, they terrified her, because part of her already knew they were true. Another roar thundered through the palace. Then Kael's voice cut through the chaos. "Alara." She looked up instinctively, and Varos saw her. The commander smiled beneath blood and smoke. There. Everything happened too fast afterward. Iron Fang soldiers surged toward the fallen pillar. Séraphine cursed violently. Kael roared, and the hatchling suddenly bit deep into Alara's wrist. Pain exploded through her arm. Blue-gold fire burst outward instantly. The world vanished. For one impossible moment, Alara stood somewhere else entirely. Snow-covered cliffs beneath a crimson moon. Dragons flying overhead. A woman kneeling before her. Silver-eyed. Blading. Beautiful. Her mother. "You must never let the kings chain you," the woman whispered urgently. "Promise me." Alara tried to speak, but the vision trembled violently. Soldiers were coming. Flames behind them. Death everywhere. Her mother pressed a black dragon egg into her small childhood hands. "If the hatchling wakes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The dragon queen blood has survived." The vision shattered. Alara gasped back into the burning hall, and suddenly, she remembered everything. The massacre, the hidden tunnels, her mother dying, the royal crest. The truth. She was not merely descended from the dragon whisperers. She was the last legitimate heir of House Valor, the final dragon queen. Varos saw recognition flood her face. His smile widened darkly. "There it is," he murmured. "Now she remembers." Kyle reached her at the same instant. His hands caught her shoulders, and the moment he touched her skin, the mate bond ignited fully. Golden fire exploded through the hall. Every dragon in the palace roared, and Kyle Draven dropped to one knee before her. Not by choice, by instinct. The entire battlefield froze in shock. The Dragon King had just knelt before the lost Dragon Queen. Silence consumed the burning hall. Not true silence. War still raged beyond the shattered palace walls. Steel still screamed through distant corridors. Flames still devoured royal banners overhead. But inside the ruined throne chamber itself, time seemed to stop, because the Dragon King was kneeling. Before her, Kael Draven, the feared ruler of the northern kingdoms. the man whose name alone silenced rival courts, remained frozen on one knee with golden fire surging violently beneath his skin. His hand still gripped Alara's wrist, where the mate bond had awakened, but now his touch trembled, not with weakness, with restraint. The force of the bond rolled through the hall like invisible thunder. Wolves throughout the palace began howling all at once. The giant chained dragon lowered its head completely to the marble floor. Even the hatchling curled tighter around Alara's shoulders, chirping softly in satisfaction. The kingdom itself had just witnessed something ancient, something forbidden, the return of the Dragon Queen and the kneeling of her king. Varro stared in open disbelief for perhaps the first time in decades. Then slowly, horribly, he smiled. So the prophecy was true. End of Lodin. Kale lifted his head sharply. His eyes were no longer fully human. Gold burned through black pupils like molten metal. "Ilara," he said quietly, voice strained with effort. "Look at me." She did, and immediately understood the danger. The bond was consuming him, not emotionally, physically. Dragonfire raced wildly beneath his skin now, climbing across his throat and jaw in glowing cracks. Heat radiated from him in suffocating waves. His control, the iron restraint he had clearly spent years building, was collapsing in real time. All because he touched her. "Ilara." His voice roughened further. "You need to leave the palace." "No." The answer escaped before she could think. Kyle froze slightly. So did she. Her whole life obedience had been survival. Yet something inside her rebelled violently at the thought of abandoning him here, while his body burned itself apart. Varos laughed softly nearby. Beautiful, tragic, exactly like the old stories. Kyle rose slowly to his feet. The movement looked painful, not physically, internally, like standing against a tidal wave tearing through his bones. When he faced Varos again, dragonfire curled visibly from his mouth as he spoke. "You should have stayed outside my walls." Varos tilted his head. "And let the Dragon Queen restore your bloodline?" His expression darkened. "I watched your father bury children alive to prevent this." Ilara's stomach turned. Kale's face went deathly still. The commander continued mercilessly. "Your precious kingdom murdered every whisperer infant they could find, burned hatchlings inside their shells, chained dragons beneath mountains." He looked toward Ilara. "And now you kneel before the last survivor." The words hit the room like poison, because they were true. Ilara saw it now in fragments sharpened by returning memory. Soldiers dragging screaming women through snow, dragon eggs crushed beneath royal boots, fire raining across mountain sanctuaries while kings called it peace. Her bloodline had not vanished. It had been exterminated. Kale looked at her then, not defensively, not proudly, ashamed. The realization cut deeper than she expected. "You knew," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "I knew parts of it. That my family was murdered? I knew my father feared the whisperers. That isn't the same thing." "No." His voice lowered painfully. "It isn't." For a moment the burning hall disappeared around Ilara. All she could see was the terrible honesty in his face. Kale had not created the slaughter, but he had inherited its throne, inherited its silence, inherited its blood-soaked crown. And somewhere beneath all his power lived a man terrified he had become the monster his father raised him to be. Varro sensed the fracture instantly, which meant he attacked it. "You see now," the commander called toward Ilara. "Kings do not love your kind. They use you until fear returns." Kale's flames exploded outward violently. Enough. The force shattered nearby pillars. Several Iron Fang soldiers were hurled backward into burning debris. But Varos only smiled wider. "Does she know what happens to women bonded to your dragon soul?" Ilara looked sharply toward Kale. He said nothing. Too late again. Varos laughed. "Ah, so you hid that too." The hatchling hissed furiously. Kale's voice dropped dangerously. "You speak too much for a dying man, and you hide too much for a king." Varos pointed toward the glowing fire beneath Kyle's skin. "The dragon soul inside him is broken, corrupted. Every woman he bonds with burns alive eventually." The words slammed into Ilara's chest. Memories resurfaced instantly. Servants, whispering about dead brides. Healers, vanishing. The king never allowing touch. Kyle's silence confirmed everything. Pain flickered briefly across his face, not because the secret was exposed, but because she now looked at him with fear. That hurt him. She saw it clearly. More than battle. More than betrayal. More than prophecy. "Ilara," he said quietly, almost pleadingly. "Listen to me carefully. The bond is incomplete. If you leave now, you think I'm afraid of you?" His expression tightened sharply. "You should be." The honesty of it made her chest ache. Kyle was not denying the danger. He was warning her because he genuinely feared hurting her. The giant dragon behind them rumbled deeply, not in anger. Agreement. Little flame. The ancient voice echoed inside her mind. He cages himself to protect others. Ilara's throat tightened painfully. Across the hall, Seraphine watched everything unfold with hollow devastation. The crown she spent years securing was already gone. Not politically. Spiritually. The kingdom had witnessed fate choose someone else. And Kale, cold, untouchable Kyle, was looking at Ilara like a starving man seeing light for the first time in years. Seraphine's expression hardened into something grief-stricken and cruel. "You still don't understand," she whispered toward Ilara. Ilara turned sharply. Seraphine stepped forward from the smoke, silver wedding gown stained with ash and blood. She looked less like a bride now, and more like a ghost wandering through the ruins of her own future. "The bond will destroy him," Seraphine said softly. "That's why the prophecy terrified the royal line." Kyle's voice sharpened. "Seraphine." But she ignored him. When the Dragon Queen awakens a king fully, his dragon soul consumes everything human left inside him. Her eyes locked onto Ilara's. Eventually, he stops distinguishing enemies from threats to his mate. Ilara looked slowly toward Kale. He did not deny that either, because it was true. And suddenly everything made sense. The isolation, the restraint, the refusal to touch anyone. Kale had spent years imprisoning himself because he feared what his dragon would become if it ever truly claimed someone. Now the bond had awakened anyway. Varos stepped forward, smiling darkly. "Which is why this ends tonight." He raised one armored hand sharply. The Iron Fang soldiers surrounding the hall dropped to one knee instantly. Then each of them drew silver hooks, attached to chains, etched with glowing moon runes. Dragon execution chains. The same kind used during the slaughter of the Whisperers. The giant dragon roared in fury. Kale's expression turned murderous instantly. "Run, Ilara." The Iron Fangs threw the chains. Everything exploded into motion. Kyle transformed first. Not fully human anymore. Golden scales tore across his arms and throat. Dragonfire erupted from his spine in violent waves. His roar shook the palace itself as he intercepted the chains midair with clawed hands burning molten gold. Ilara stuttered in shock. He was beautiful, terrifyingly so, not monstrous. Ancien, power, barely restrained by flesh. The giant dragon lunged from behind them with a deafening roar, smashing soldiers beneath chained claws. The hatchling launched from Ilara's shoulder, breathing blue fire wildly at advancing hunters. Battle consumed the throne hall completely. Yet through all the chaos, Varos kept advancing toward her. Slowly, patiently, like a man approaching destiny. "You remember now," he said calmly. Ilara backed away instinctively. "Yes. Then you know what waits beneath the palace." Her pulse stumbled. The dragon vault. The buried chambers. The ancient prison. Varos smiled faintly. "Your mother hid more than eggs before she died." The words struck her hard. "What?" Kale roared through the battlefield. "Don't listen to him." But Varos kept speaking. "There's another dragon beneath the mountain," he said softly. "Not chained. Sleeping." The giant dragon behind Ilara snarled violently. Varos's smile widened. The last Dragon King. The world seemed to stop. Ilara's breath caught painfully. Kale's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Varos saw it and laughed. "There it is," He never told you. Ilara looked toward Kyle. He was fighting 3 Iron Fang captains at once, dragonfire tearing through the hall around him, yet his eyes remained fixed on her. Protective, desperate. Ilara, he said harshly. Stay away from the lower vaults. Why? He hesitated. Too long. Veros answered for him. Because the last Dragon King went mad protecting his Whisperer Queen, the commander whispered. And when she died, he slaughtered entire kingdoms before they buried him alive beneath Veyrath. The giant dragon roared again, this time with grief. Kyle finally tore through the remaining soldiers surrounding him and started toward Ilara. Too late. Veros reached her first, and with horrifying speed, he drove a moon rune blade directly into his own chest. Ilara froze in shock. Blood exploded across the marble. The commander smiled through it. Then the runes carved into his armor ignited bright silver. Kale's face changed instantly. Ilara Movi. The dead commander's body detonated. Moonfire consumed the throne hall. Moonfire swallowed the throne hall whole. Silver light exploded outward in a violent sphere, obliterating pillars, banners, and stone alike. The force hurled bodies across the chamber. Iron Fang soldiers burned alive instantly, their screams vanishing beneath the deafening roar of collapsing marble. Ilara never saw the blast reach her, because Kale reached her first. One moment he was across the battlefield wrapped in dragonfire and blood. The next, his arms were around her. Then came impact. The world shattered into heat, smoke, and darkness. Stone crashed around them. The floor gave way beneath their feet. Ilara felt herself falling through collapsing marble, with Kale's body wrapped tightly around hers, shielding her completely as moonfire tore through the palace above. Then silence. Heavy. Buried. The air smelled of ash and ancient earth. Ilara coughed violently, struggling to breathe beneath layers of dust. Pain throbbed through her ribs and shoulders, but she was alive, because Kale had taken the full force of the blast. Coil. No answer. Panic stabbed through her chest instantly. She pushed herself upright inside the darkness. Broken stone surrounded them on every side. Faint blue fire from the hatchling illuminated the chamber weakly, revealing ancient ruins beneath the palace. Vast black walls carved with dragon symbols older than the kingdom above. The lower vaults. Her pulse quickened. The collapse had thrown them beneath Veyrath. Kyle. This time she found him. He lay half-buried beneath fallen stone nearby, unmoving. Ilara crawled toward him immediately. The moment blue fire illuminated his face, terror gripped her throat. The moonfire had burned through his dragon scales. Silver wounds spread across his chest and arms, glowing faintly with execution runes. Blood stained the black stone beneath him. And worst of all, the dragonfire beneath his skin was fading. No. Ilara dropped beside him, hands trembling violently. The hatchling whimpered and nudged Kale's arm. No response. Fear cracked something open inside her. Not fear for herself. For him. This man who frightened entire kingdoms had thrown himself into moonfire without hesitation to keep her alive. And now he might die because of it. Kale. Her voice broke softly. Please. Slowly, painfully, his eyes opened. Gold flickered weakly beneath dark lashes. Relief hit her so hard she nearly collapsed. You're alive. A faint breath of humor touched his mouth despite the blood. Disappointed? The weak joke startled an almost hysterical laugh out of her. Kyle stared at her for a long second then, as though hearing that sound mattered more than his injuries. Then pain tightened his face sharply. The silver wounds spread farther. Ilara looked down at the moon runes burning through his skin and understood immediately. Execution magic, designed specifically to kill dragon-blooded kings. Kyle saw realization hit her expression. Don't touch the wounds, he said hoarsely. The curse spreads through contact. Ilara ignored him instantly. She pressed both hands against his chest. Kale inhaled sharply. Ilara. Blue-gold light erupted beneath her palms. The runes burned brighter, then began to fade. Kale stared at her in disbelief. You're healing it. I don't know how. Neither do I. Yet it worked. Ancient warmth flowed through her veins again. Deeper now. Stronger. The same magic that healed the hatchling poured into Kael's body. The moon runes cracked apart beneath her touch. But something else happened too. The bond opened wider. Suddenly, Alara could feel him. Not thoughts exactly. Emotions. Pain. Exhaustion. Fury restrained for too many years. And beneath all of it, a loneliness so profound it nearly stole her breath. Kael felt her feel it. His eyes closed briefly. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't what? Look at me like that." Her chest tightened painfully. Like what? Like I'm worth grieving. The quiet honesty of it shattered her. This man truly believed his life existed only as duty. A weapon. A cursed throne wearing human skin. No wonder he feared the bond. No wonder he kept everyone at distance. Alara kept healing him silently. Kael finally opened his eyes again and studied her face carefully in the flickering blue light. "You should hate me," he said quietly. The statement surprised her. "For what?" "My family destroyed yours." The words settled heavily between them. Above them, faint tremors still shook the buried vaults. Battle continued somewhere in the palace overhead. But down here in the darkness beneath the mountain, there was only the two of them, and truth. Alara lowered her gaze briefly. "I want to." Kael accepted that without defense. "But you didn't do it," she whispered. "No. I only inherited the throne built over their graves." Pain moved behind his eyes, then not self-pity, but guilt inherited so deeply it had become part of his bones. The hatchling suddenly chirped nervously. The giant dragon's distant roar echoed faintly through the tunnels above. Something was moving beneath the mountain. Kael heard it too. His expression sharpened instantly despite exhaustion. "We need to leave." But before either could move, ancient blue flames ignited along the walls around them. One by one, dragon runes awakened across the chamber. Alara froze. The vault wasn't merely ruins. It was a sanctuary. No, a tome. Massive pillars rose from darkness ahead, carved with names in a forgotten language. Dragon skeletons rested along the chamber edges like sleeping mountains. Chains thicker than trees lay shattered across black stone floors. And at the center of it all stood an enormous sealed gate of obsidian. The moment Alara looked at it, the gate answered. The royal crest beneath her throat burned white-hot. Kael swore softly. No. The doors trembled, then slowly began opening on their own. Ancient air rushed outward carrying heat, ash, and the scent of something impossibly old. The hatchling whimpered. The dragon beneath the palace had awakened. Not the chained guardian above. The sleeping king below. Kael forced himself upright despite pain ripping through his body. "Alara, listen to me carefully." She looked toward him. His face had gone pale beneath the fading dragon fire. "When those doors open fully," he said quietly, "you cannot let him bond to you." Fear curled coldly through her chest. "Why?" Kael's gaze locked onto the opening darkness beyond the gate. "Because he isn't chained." The doors groaned wider. A massive heartbeat echoed from within. Slow, ancien, alive. Then came a voice, not inside Alara's mind this time. Spoken aloud. "Male. Broken. Hungry. Violor." The sound alone shook the chamber. Kael stepped in front of Alara immediately despite his injuries. Protective instinct. Automatic now. "Alara," he said quietly without looking away from the gate. "If I lose control, you run." Her throat tightened. "Kael, I mean it." The darkness beyond the gate shifted. Two colossal golden eyes opened slowly within the abyss. Not dragon eyes. Something worse. Half human, half beast. Ancient power rolled through the chamber hard enough to force cracks through the floor. Then, the creature stepped forward. Huge, crowned, wrapped in broken chains and black scales, fused directly into flesh. The last Dragon King. And when he saw Alara, he smiled. The smile was the most terrifying thing Alara had ever seen. Not because it was cruel, because it was sorrowful. The last Dragon King stepped fully into the blue firelight of the ancient vault, and the mountain itself seemed to breathe around him. He was enormous, not in the mindless way of beasts, but in the way legends were enormous. His body carried remnants of both king and dragon. Black scales armored one side of his chest and throat, while the other remained painfully human beneath torn ceremonial cloth faded by centuries underground. Heavy chains hung broken from his wrists and waist. A shattered crown of obsidian and gold rested crookedly upon dark hair streaked silver with age. But it was his eyes that froze Alara in place. Golden. The exact same gold as Kael's, only older. Mela. Lunlie. Valar. He whispered again, staring directly at the crest glowing beneath Alara's throat. The hatchling whimpered softly and hid against her shoulder. Kyle moved another step in front of her, despite the moonfire wound still burning through his skin. "Stay back." The ancient king's gaze shifted toward him slowly. Recognition flickered there, then disappointment. "You wear my blood," the ancient ruler said, voice deep enough to shake stone. "Yet you hide behind fear." Kael's jaw tightened. "You destroyed kingdoms." The old king laughed softly. The sound broke Alara's heart. Yes, no denial, no excuse, only grief. Blue flames curled higher across the chamber walls, illuminating ancient carvings around them. Alara saw dragons soaring beside crowned women bearing the Valor crest. Dragon whisperer queens. Kings kneeling before them willingly, not as slaves, but as partners. A forgotten age, before blood and fear corrupted everything. The ancient king looked at Alara again, and suddenly she understood something terrible. He knew her, not personally, by blood, the way dragons recognize dragons. "You have her eyes," he murmured. Alara swallowed carefully. "Whose?" Pain crossed the old king's face. "My queen's." Silence settled heavily across the vault. Kael never lowered his guard. "Don't speak about her." The old king's expression sharpened instantly. "You know nothing about her. I know you burned entire cities after she died." Golden fire flickered violently beneath the ancient ruler's scaled skin. "And what would you burn?" he asked quietly. "If they murdered your mate before your eyes?" The question hit Kael like a blade. Alara felt it through the bond immediately, because somewhere deep inside himself, Kyle already knew the answer. The old king saw it too. A dark smile touched his mouth. "Ah," he whispered. "Now I understand." Kael's dragonfire surged dangerously. "Do not look into my bond. You brought her before me, carrying an awakened soul mark. There is no hiding it." Alara frowned sharply. "Soul mark?" The ancient king looked toward her. The mate bond between dragon kings and whisperer queens. His gaze softened unexpectedly. "Rare, dangerous, absolute." Kael spoke coldly. "It destroys people." "No." The old king's eyes darkened. "Fear destroys people. Men destroyed the bond, long before the bond destroyed men." Alara's pulse quickened. Fragments of truth were beginning to connect inside her mind now. The royal bloodline had feared the dragon queens because the bond changed kings too deeply, made them protective, devoted, impossible to politically control. So they slaughtered the whisperers. Not because the queens were monsters, because they made kings choose love over power. The realization horrified her, and from Kael's expression, he realized it too. The ancient king slowly approached. Kael immediately stepped forward with a growl low in his throat. "Another step and I'll kill you." The old king's smile turned unbearably sad. "No, you won't." Then he looked directly at Alara. "Because she would mourn you." The words silenced the chamber. Ilara's breath caught. "Coil vent still." The old king exhaled slowly. Ancient exhaustion carved into every movement. "You think your fear makes you noble," he said quietly to Kael. "You think starving yourself of attachment protects the world." His eyes hardened. "It does not." Kael's voice sharpened. "You murdered thousands. I avenged her. That isn't the same thing." The old king suddenly roared. The entire vault shook violently. "You speak of judgment while standing inside a kingdom built on slaughtered children." The force of his rage sent ancient fire spiraling across the chamber walls. Ilara flinched instinctively. Immediately, Kael moved closer to shield her. He saw that too, and smiled again. "There it is," he whispered. Kael's expression darkened with fury. "Stop looking at her. Impossible." The old king's gaze lingered on Ilara, almost reverently now. The mountain itself woke when her blood returned. The hatchling chirped softly in agreement. Ilara's throat tightened. "Why am I here?" Silence. Then the ancient king answered with terrible honesty. "To decide whether dragons survive." The words settled like doom across the vault. Kael cursed softly beneath his breath. Ilara stared at the old king. "I don't understand." "You will." The ancient ruler turned toward the vast darkness behind him, where deeper tunnels vanished beneath the mountain. "There are eggs still sleeping beneath Veyrath," he said quietly. "Hundreds." Ilara's breath stopped. Kael's face drained of color. The old king continued mercilessly. "Your mother hid them before the slaughter." The world tilted beneath Ilara. Hundreds. Not one hatchling. Not one surviving dragon. An entire future buried beneath the kingdom. Kael stepped toward the old king dangerously. "You kept that hidden? I kept them alive. You kept a weapon beneath my throne." The ancient king's eyes flashed. "No. Your ancestors built their throne atop a graveyard and prayed history would stay buried." The bond between Ilara and Kael pulsed painfully, because both men were right, and both were wounded by truths too old to survive cleanly. Above them, distant explosions echoed faintly through stone. The battle in the palace still raged. Iron Fang soldiers likely hunted survivors through burning corridors even now. Yet down here, history itself stood breathing in front of them. The ancient king suddenly looked sharply toward the ceiling. "They're coming." Kael heard it a second later. Heavy impacts. Drilling. Moon rune explosive. The Iron Fangs were breaking into the lower vaults. Varos had planned this from the beginning. Not merely to kill Ilara, to find the hidden dragon sanctuaries beneath Veyrath. Kael's expression hardened instantly. "We need to seal the vault." The old king laughed bitterly. Too late. A massive explosion shook the chamber overhead. Dust cascaded downward. Then screams echoed through the tunnels. Iron Fang soldiers. Closer now. The ancient king looked toward Ilara again, and for the first time since awakening, he knelt. The movement stunned her. A king older than kingdoms, bowing before her bloodline. "Little queen," he said softly. "The dragons will obey your choice." Ilara stared at him in shock. "I don't want kingdoms kneeling." "Good." His expression darkened painfully. "That means you were born worthy of it." Another explosion thundered above. Kael grabbed Ilara's wrist gently. "We're leaving." But the ancient king's gaze sharpened suddenly. "No." Kael turned instantly hostile. "Move." The old ruler ignored him completely. "They're not hunting her anymore," he said quietly. Ilara's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" The ancient king looked toward the tunnel entrance, where distant silver light now flickered. Then he spoke the words that froze the blood inside her veins. They came for the eggs. As if summoned by truth itself, dozens of moon rune lights suddenly ignited through the upper tunnels. Iron Fang soldiers poured into the ancient vault, and at their center walked someone Ilara never expected to see again. The High Priestess. Her white ceremonial robes were stained with blood and ash now. The fear she once carried had vanished entirely, replaced by cold, fanatic certainty. When her eyes found Ilara, hatred blazed openly across her face. "You should have died with the others," she whispered. Then the priestess lifted an ancient silver staff, etched with dragon-killing runes, and pointed it directly at the sleeping eggs hidden beneath the mountain. "No." The word tore from Ilara before thought. The high priestess smiled, not pleasantly, triumphantly. Around her, Iron Fang soldiers spread through the vault with disciplined precision, silver lanterns casting cold moonlight across ancient dragon carvings. Some carried execution chains. Others hauled rune-marked explosives toward the deeper sanctuaries beneath the mountain. They were not here to capture. They were here to erase the future. Again, Kael stepped in front of Ilara instantly, dragonfire rippling violently beneath his skin. "You've doomed the kingdom." The high priestess lifted her chin. "I saved it." Behind Alara, the ancient dragon king rose slowly from his kneeling position. The movement alone shook the chamber floor. Blue flames reflected across broken scales and old scars as fury awakened in his enormous body. The priestess did not even glance at him. Interesting. She feared Alara more than the creature capable of destroying armies. That realization unsettled Alara deeply. "You knew," Alara whispered toward the priestess. "You always knew who I was." The older woman's gaze finally shifted toward her fully. "I knew what your bloodline becomes. Then why keep me alive?" Silence stretched. Then the priestess answered with brutal honesty. "Because your mother begged." The words struck Alara harder than any blade. Memory flashed violently behind her eyes. A snowy corridor beneath torchlight. A silver-eyed woman kneeling before priests. "Take my life. Spare my daughter." Alara staggered. Kale steadied her immediately, one burning hand hovering at her waist without fully touching. Always restraining himself, always afraid of harming her. The high priestess watched the movement with bitter disgust. "She should have let you die," she said coldly. "It would have spared us all this." The hatchling hissed furiously. Alara looked up slowly. "You murdered children." Pain flickered briefly across the priestess's face. Not guilt. Old grief twisted into fanaticism. "I watched dragons devour villages," she whispered. "I watched bonded kings burn their own armies alive, protecting whisperer queens." Her grip tightened around the staff. Love becomes madness when dragons touch it. Kyle's expression darkened sharply. The ancient dragon king laughed bitterly behind them. "And fear becomes genocide when cowards rule." The priestess ignored him. Her eyes remained fixed on Alara alone. "You think yourself different because you heal instead of burn," she said quietly. "But power changes all blood eventually." Alara's chest tightened painfully, because part of her feared the same thing. She could feel the bond changing Kale already, feel his instincts sharpening around her, feel the dragon inside him reacting to every danger she faced. What would happen if the bond completed fully? Would he still remain himself? Would she? The ancient king suddenly spoke inside her mind again. "Little queen, love does not create monsters. It reveals them." Alara looked sharply toward him. His golden eyes softened with ancient sorrow. Kale noticed the silent exchange immediately. His jaw tightened. Jealousy. The realization startled Alara deeply. Not petti jealousy. Instinctive possessiveness born from the bond itself. And Kale hated himself for feeling it. The priestess saw everything unfolding between them, which meant she attacked before uncertainty could fade. Kill the hatchling. Iron Fang soldiers moved instantly. 3 archers raised moon-rune bows toward the baby dragon perched on Alara's shoulder. Kyle's dragonfire exploded. Too late. The arrows flew. Alara reacted without thinking. Power burst from her body in a violent wave of blue-gold light. The arrows froze mid-air, suspended inside glowing fire. The entire vault fell silent. Alara stared at the floating weapons in shock. Then slowly, the arrows melted into silver ash. The hatchling chirped proudly. The sleeping dragon eggs hidden deeper in the mountain answered. One by one, faint heartbeats echoed through the vault. Alive. Hundreds of them. The Iron Fang soldiers recoiled in horror. The priestess's face went white. No. Another heartbeat answered. Then another. Then dozens more. The mountain itself seemed to awaken. Blue fire spread through ancient runes carved into the walls. Dust shook loose from the ceiling as hidden chambers beneath the vault began glowing softly, like stars buried underground. Alara could feel them now. The eggs, sleeping minds curled around fading warmth. Lonely, waiting. The sensation nearly broke her heart. The ancient dragon king bowed his head slightly. They know their queen. The words terrified the room. Kael looked at Alara with something raw and unguarded now. Not fear of her power, but fear of what the kingdom would force her to become because of it. The high priestess raised her silver staff with shaking hands. "Do not listen to them," she hissed. This is how it begins. The old Dragon King's expression hardened. No, this is how it begins again. The priestess screamed in fury and slammed the base of her staff against the stone floor. Moon runes erupted across the vault instantly. Execution magic. Silver chains burst from beneath the ground, racing toward Alara from every direction. Kyle moved first. The ancient king moved second. Dragonfire and black flame collided against moon rune magic in a catastrophic explosion that shook the mountain itself. The battle for the vault began. Iron Fang soldiers charged through smoke and fire. The ancient Dragon King roared loud enough to rupture stone, smashing entire lines of hunters beneath clawed hands. Kale transformed further beside him now, black gold scales spreading across his throat and arms as dragonfire consumed the battlefield. Yet even while fighting, Kale kept turning toward Alara, checking, protecting, watching. The bond pulled him toward her relentlessly, and every time she nearly fell beneath chains or blades, his control shattered further. The priestess saw it happening, which was why she smiled, suddenly through the chaos. "You still don't understand," she shouted toward Alara. Ilara blasted another wave of blue-gold fire through advancing soldiers. "Understand what?" The priestess pointed toward Kale. "He cannot survive the completed bond." The words cut through battle instantly. Kyle froze for one fatal second, and Ironfang blood sliced across his side. Blood splashed across black stone. Alara cried out instinctively. Dragonfire exploded through the chamber. Kale tore the attacker apart, barehanded with terrifying violence. "Not human anymore." The priestess laughed bitterly. "Look at him." Ilara stared in horror. Golden fire now poured continuously from beneath Kyle's skin. His eyes glowed fully molten. Clawed hands shook with constant restraint. The bond was overloading the dragon soul inside him, and he knew it. That was the cruelest part. He had always known. "Ilara," Kale shouted through the chaos. "Ignore her." But the priestess continued, mercilessly. "Every Dragon King eventually loses himself after bonding fully to a Whisperer Queen. Their instincts consume reason. Their love becomes annihilation." The ancient Dragon King roared in fury. "Liar! You burn nations." Silence cracked violently through the chamber. Because he had. The old king staggered slightly beneath the truth. The priestess turned toward Alara again, eyes blazing fanatically now. "If you complete the bond, he will become the same thing." Alara's chest tightened painfully. Kale's eyes found hers across the battlefield, and she realized the most terrible truth of all. He believed it too. That was why he kept pushing her away. Why he feared touching her. Why loneliness wrapped around him like chains. Not because he feared death, because he feared becoming a monster that would one day hurt her. The realization shattered something inside her. Kale roared suddenly as moon-rune chains wrapped around his arms and throat. Dozens of Iron Fang soldiers dragged the enchanted restraints tight, forcing him to one knee. The priestess lifted her staff toward him. Silver light gathered at its tip. Dragon execution magic. "Ilara," Kale rasped sharply, struggling against the chains. "Don't come near me." The command sounded almost desperate. The priestess smiled coldly. "Watch carefully, little queen. This is what your love creates." She brought the staff down toward Kyle's heart. Ilara moved, not with hesitation, not with fear, with certainty. Blue-gold fire exploded from her body so violently the entire vault vanished beneath light. Every dragon egg beneath the mountain awakened at once. The sleeping sanctuary roared alive, and for the first time in centuries, the Dragon Queen unleashed her full power. The mountain woke screaming. Blue-gold fire burst through every chamber beneath Veyrath, racing through ancient runes like lightning through veins. Hidden sanctuaries cracked open beneath the palace floor. Stone seals shattered. Dragon eggs buried for centuries, ignited with living light. And at the center of it all stood Ilara. The force erupting from her body drove every Iron Fang soldier backward. Moon-rune chains melted into silver liquid around Kale's wrists and throat. The high priestess staggered hard enough to drop her staff entirely. No one had ever seen power like this. Not destruction, authority. The mountain itself obeyed her. The ancient Dragon King lowered his head immediately. So did the chained guardian dragon behind them. Even the hatchling spread its tiny wings proudly, crying out in triumph. Only Kale remained standing. Barely. His eyes locked onto Alara, through the storm of fire and ash, filled not with fear, but awe and terror for her. "Alara," he said hoarsely. She barely heard him. The awakening consumed everything. The dragon eggs beneath the sanctuary pulsed together in vast, synchronized rhythm. Hundreds of sleeping hearts answering their queen after centuries of silence. Alive. Still alive. Tears burned down Alara's face. They survived. Against slaughter. Against kings. Against time itself. The priestess recovered first. "Stop her!" she screamed. Iron Fang's soldiers charged again despite obvious terror. Alara lifted one trembling hand. The entire vault answered. Ancient dragon fire exploded from the walls themselves, sweeping through the chamber in controlled waves that disarmed soldiers without burning them alive. Swords melted. Moon-rune chains shattered. The mountain rejected the invaders violently, because this place had never truly belonged to kings. It belonged to dragons. The high priestess stared around the awakening sanctuary in horror. "No, no, this cannot happen again." The ancient Dragon King's voice thundered through the vault. It never ended. The priestess grabbed her fallen silver staff desperately and turned toward the deepest chamber beneath the mountain, toward the eggs, toward the future. If she could not kill Alara, she would finish the extermination herself. Kale saw her move instantly. "Alara." The warning ripped through the chamber. The priestess slammed the staff into the sanctuary floor. Moon-rune execution magic erupted outward directly toward the hidden nests below, toward hundreds of sleeping dragons, toward unborn lives. Alara reacted instinctively. She stepped between the magic and the sanctuary. Kael's face changed instantly. Pure fear. "Alara no." The execution wave struck her body full force. Agony exploded through her veins. Moon runes burned across her skin like molten silver. Ancient anti-dragon magic ripped through her bloodline brutally, searching for dragon fire to destroy. The sanctuary screamed around her. The hatchling cried out in panic. Kael moved. Not as king, not as ruler, as mate. Dragon fire detonated from his body in catastrophic waves. Black gold scales tore fully across his arms, neck, and jaw as the beast inside him finally broke free, completely. Iron Fang soldiers fled in terror. The high priestess stared in horror, because the Dragon King was transforming, not partially, fully. Kael roared a sound no human throat could survive, and the entire vault collapsed into flame. Massive black wings erupted from his back. Claws shattered stone. Golden eyes burned like suns through smoke and ash. The last restraint inside him finally died, and all he saw was Alara in pain. The transformed Dragon King crossed the vault in one violent movement and seized the execution magic with his bare claws. The moon runes burned through his flesh instantly. He did not care. Alara. His voice was deeper now. Ancien. Half-dragon. He wrapped himself around her protectively as the execution magic tore through both of them. The bond ignited completely. Fire exploded through the sanctuary. Alara gasped as she suddenly felt everything inside him. Every lonely year, every terrified restraint, every sleepless night spent fearing the monster beneath his skin. Every moment he denied himself touch because he thought loving anyone would eventually kill them. And beneath all of it, here, he had loved her long before he allowed himself to name it. The realization shattered her heart. Coil? His transformed face pressed against her hair, trembling violently. "I tried to stop it," he whispered brokenly. The moon runes spread farther across his scales. The priestess laughed weakly through tears. "Look at him. The madness begins." But the ancient Dragon King stepped forward then. "No," he said softly. Everyone turned toward him. The old ruler's golden eyes rested on Kale, with unbearable understanding. "That is not madness." The ancient king slowly approached the bonded pair. "For centuries," he said quietly, Men feared the mate bond because they mistook devotion for weakness. His gaze shifted toward the priestess. So they murdered queens and called it peace. The priestess shook violently. You destroyed kingdoms. Yes. Agony crossed the old king's face. Because they killed her. Silence filled the sanctuary. The truth settled heavily at last. Not corruption. Grief. The world had blamed dragons for what grief-stricken kings became after losing their mates. The bond itself had never been the curse. Loss was. The ancient king looked toward Kael gently now. You are not becoming me. Kael's claws tightened around Ilara protectively. How do you know? Because she still reaches for your humanity. Ilara realized suddenly that she was holding his face, not recoiling, not afraid, holding him. And beneath her touch, the violent shaking inside him slowly eased. The sanctuary quieted. The dragon fire softened. Kael stared at her with raw disbelief. You're not afraid. Ilara's eyes burned with tears. You crossed moonfire for me. The transformed king closed his eyes briefly, like the words wounded him somehow. You should have run. And left you alone again? Something broke across his face then. Not monstrousness. Relief. The high priestess watched the exchange in horror, because the thing she feared most was not dragons. It was proof she had been wrong. No, she whispered desperately. No, this isn't real. The ancient dragon king turned toward her slowly. You spent your life trying to prevent monsters, he said quietly, and became one yourself. The words destroyed her. The priestess staggered backward, trembling violently. Outside the sanctuary, distant battle sounds were fading now. The Iron Fang Legion was collapsing without leadership. The surviving soldiers fled through burning tunnels as dragons awakened beneath the mountain around them. The kingdom above would never be the same. The ancient king looked toward Ilara once more. The choice remains yours, little queen. Ilara swallowed carefully. What choice? To restore dragons to the world. His gaze softened. Or let us die with dignity. The sanctuary fell silent. Hundreds of sleeping heartbeats waited beneath the mountain. Kael looked at her quietly. No command. No pressure. Only trust. The same trust he once asked from her in the burning throne hall. Ilara closed her eyes briefly. All her life, powerful people had demanded obedience. But this was choice. Real choice. When she opened her eyes again, she looked toward the sleeping sanctuary beneath Veyrath, then toward Kael, then toward the ancient king kneeling before a future he would never see, and finally toward the frightened hatchling curled against her shoulder. Ilara inhaled softly. They deserved to live. The sanctuary erupted. Dragonfire roared through the mountain in glorious waves. Eggs awakened one after another beneath the vault, pulsing with life and ancient magic. The giant guardian dragon threw back its head with a cry so powerful the entire kingdom above heard it. The age of dragons had returned. The high priestess collapsed to her knees weeping, not from hatred anymore, from understanding too late. Kael looked at Ilara, like she had remade the world, and perhaps she had. The ancient dragon king smiled softly then, peacefully, for the first time in centuries. My queen, he whispered. Then his body began turning to ash. Ilara gasped softly. No, he shook his head. My bond ended long ago. The old king looked toward Kael one final time. Love her openly, he said quietly, or history will repeat itself. Kael bowed his head deeply, not as king, as son of the same curse. The ancient ruler smiled once more toward Ilara. Then the last dragon king vanished into golden ash beneath the awakening sanctuary. Silence followed. Soft. Sacred. Kael slowly turned toward Ilara. The dragon transformation had receded partly now, though scales still marked his throat and hands. He looked exhausted. Raw. Beautifully undone. And vulnerable in a way no king should ever allow. Ilara, he said quietly. She stepped toward him. This time he did not retreat. The entire sanctuary watched as Ilara placed both hands gently against his face. No fire burned her. No curse consumed her. Only warmth. Only bond. Kael closed his eyes like a man finally setting down unbearable weight. Then slowly, carefully, the Dragon King leaned his forehead against hers. Above them, dawn finally broke across Veyrath, and for the first time in generations, the kingdom woke not to fear dragons, but to their song.